The era of the Twilight Wars is over. Much of mankind has picked up many of these shattered pieces of civilization and begun to turn their attention away from domination of our Earth and toward the conquest and exploitation of our galaxy. It's the dawn of the 24th century, and humanity is discovering the stars. At least that's the premise of the latest edition of 2300 AD from Mongoose Publishing, and I'll share my review right after this. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Got to point out, it is a little bit chilly down here in the Duct Tape Studios today, and I've got a little bit of a cold, so I apologize if I'm a little more nasally than usual. But regardless, we're going to just plow on through because today I am going to be sharing my review of the 2300 AD box set from Mongoose Publishing. The box set carries an MSRP of $99.99. You'll get the PDFs absolutely free if you order from Mongoose Publishing. And of course, if you just want to grab the PDFs alone, you can do so over at DriveThruRPG for $49.99. Having said all that, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got the box set for 2300 AD. A couple of things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, the fine folks over at Mongoose Publishing were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. It's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of each of the three books in here, but I do want to give you a really good feel of what you're going to find inside. All right, so inside the box set, we are going to have a poster map of known space for 2300 AD, and I got to say, this is legitimately a poster map. It is big. It's not just 2 panels by 2 panels or even 3 panels by 3 panels. It is a 4x4. All that goodness right there. And then, of course, we also have a trio of books. We've got characters and equipment, the worlds of 2300 AD, and then vehicles and spacecraft. Now, I did a fairly in-depth live first look not too long ago. If you want to get a better look inside each of these volumes, you might want to take a peek at that. But do want to mention a few things also as far as 2300 AD. This is built on the Traveler rules. So even if you pick up this box set, you still have to have the core rulebook for Traveler. So it is the 2022 update, which is the latest of the Traveler core rulebooks. So this is not standalone. This is essentially an expansion. It is a very in-depth expansion for Traveler, but this is not a standalone role-playing game. Now, having mentioned Traveler, something that kind of confuses people, I've been confused by this over the years myself. Even though this has Traveler trade dress on the box, even though you are using the rules for Traveler, even though the player characters are called Travelers, this is not part of the Traveler universe. This is not the Third Imperium. This is actually set in the world of Twilight 2000, which, interestingly enough, Free League Publishing now has the rights to, not Mongoose Publishing. So kind of strange how that kind of worked out. But what we're going to see here is more of a low-tech, hard science fiction role-playing game as opposed to Traveler itself. So this is taking place in the beginning of the 24th century, and mankind has expanded out into the stars. So there are colonized worlds. So this book here is all player facing. It's all for characters, character options. As far as your character creation, you are going to still use the Traveler core book. There is one additional career that's included in 2300 AD. It is the Drifter. But for the most part, if you're going to play a military character, if you're going to play a scientist, if you're going to play a scout, an explorer, you're going to go through the Traveler character creation process. And then at mustering out, you will come back to the 2300 AD book because, of course, we have a whole different tech level that's taking place in 2300 AD as opposed to the Third Imperium. So our tech level here is essentially 10 through 12. So many of the colonies out there are going to be tech level 10. They're a little behind the times. If we start moving closer in towards the core world of Earth, then you are looking at going with a higher tech level of about 12. So we do have some sentient alien races that humanity has encountered as well. And then, of course, there are also the, I believe it's pronounced Kafer, who are the sort of big bad aliens in 2300 AD. At least in this new edition, they are still fairly mysterious. I know there is an invasion plot line that's going on right now for 2300 AD. But with this core book here, they are still mysterious aliens, although it's pretty obvious that humanity is going to be butting heads with them. So our first book here is all about our character options. It's about equipment. It's about cybernetics. There is a ton of really cool stuff in here. And much of this is not in the Traveler core book or even in the equipment catalog because the tech level is lower. Now, something also that's pretty interesting about 2300 AD are the sorts of campaigns that a game master is going to run with this setting. So, of course, as I already mentioned, we are looking more at hard science fiction as opposed to space opera. Not that you are unable to put together a space operatic sort of campaign with 2300 AD, but you'll have certain kinds of campaigns are going to be more suited towards 2300 AD than maybe with Traveler. And one of those would be the colonization of a planet. Now, one of the big tenets of 2300 AD is both the hard path and the soft path as far as really humanity's future. So the hard path would be the humans are colonizing different worlds. At this point in time, terraforming is in its infancy, so you're not going to see a ton of terraforming, or at least not a lot of terraforming in its final stages. So there are some early level terraforming planets, but you're going to find that with the hard path, it's humans who are looking to utilize technology and machinery in order to colonize worlds. So keeping their humanity intact. So we're not looking at going the route of transhumanism with the hard path. Now, planets like the core world do tend to skew more towards the hard path than the soft path because the reality is they don't need to worry about the soft path. Now, the soft path is the transhumanism. So making changes to the human body to adapt to these various different planets. So really cool concepts going on. And of course, In the character book, we have a lot of various different options available to the player characters if they want to go down that soft path. It's kind of funny because proponents of each feels that the opposite is going to be the ruinization of the human race. So the hard pathers think, well, if you make so many changes to the biology of a human being, well, then they're no longer going to be a human being. But interestingly enough, the soft path proponents feel that going down the hard path is going to have the same effect, except rather than having the human biology change, we'll have humans depending more and more on machines until it gets to the point where the machines would take over. So really cool. Now, the second book here, this is all about the worlds of 2300 AD. We get some setting information, and then we'll start getting into the various different planets, various different colonies. We have different factions. So some of the campaigns that you could be looking at in 2300 AD would be, of course, military, mercenaries. You could have counterterrorism because there are a lot of different factions who are trying to work against these world powers, these world governments. You could have exploration. You could also have player characters who are merchants, who are traveling between the various different colonies and have adventures there as well. These are the Kafirs, the mysterious aliens who their technology level is very similar to humanity's. And we'll get some different creatures, talk about environments. Now, you also want to keep in mind, once again, you do need to have the Traveler Core book. So you are looking at, these are in addition to those rules and those entries for equipment and things along those lines. Now, when we get into the third book, which is Vehicles and Spacecraft, this is where we'll start to see some differences with space combat compared to Traveler. And we will get into detail about space combat. Our actual ground-based combat or air-based combat really hasn't changed in 2300 AD, so you're still going to utilize essentially the same rules you have for firefights and things like that from the Traveler Core rulebook. It is with the space combat that things change. So this is all packed with various different vehicles, ground vehicles, air vehicles, different weapon systems. Then we start getting into our starships. And this is where we'll start to veer away from the Traveler Core. Different systems. We have the stutter warp, which allows travel at light speed faster than light travel. So each of the various different systems on your starship are explained. We have costs as far as building your own starship combat. A lot of people have this impression, if they're not familiar with Traveler, and by way of that, also 2300 AD, that the Traveler mechanics are complex. They honestly aren't. They're no more complex than Dungeons and Dragons. I would say Pathfinder has more complexity than Traveler does. I think where it starts to come into play that there's a lot of math is when you do have campaigns that revolve around trade and supply and demand and having to pay for expenses and things like that. If you are not getting into a campaign like that, if maybe you're doing a campaign where it's all about exploration and discovering new planets and new species, maybe even more intelligent life, probably not going to have to go through all the nuts and bolts about how to pay for repairs to your ship and things along those lines. But as you can see, there is a lot packed into this Vehicles and Spacecraft book. And of course, this isn't just a rehash of what you would find in the Traveler books either. So really nicely done. Of course, each of the books will have a detailed index. So each of these books will clock in at about 112 pages. So grand total, you're looking at 336 pages, I do believe. So these are the 3 softcover books that you're going to find inside the 2300 AD box set. If you order the PDFs from DriveThruRPG, it is one purchase, and I do believe they are broken up into 3 different PDFs for each of the books. All right, let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts as well as my review score. Well, I gotta say, I like the setting for 2300 AD. I picked up the original Game Designer's Workshop release way back in the day, and some of the Splat books that came out for it as well. Never ran it. It was another role-playing game that I would pick stuff up and read it and be entertained, and then would just continue running that week's Call of Cthulhu campaign. So, if you've been in the hobby for a while, you know how it is. But I always like the setting. I am a fan of near future science fiction. Maybe not necessarily hard science fiction, but I like stuff that's, a few hundred years down the road. That's why I was a big fan of both The Expanse as far as a series of novels and the television show. I like Kim Stanley Robinson's novels, like the Mars trilogy and things like that. So I dig that kind of stuff. And I think 2300 AD really does simulate that sort of genre very, very well. Now, what I got to say, I am surprised this is not standalone. And the reason behind that is, I think with the Traveler trade dress and with the Traveler mechanics, it just adds to the confusion of 2300 AD. Once again, it is not set in the world of Traveler. It just uses the Traveler mechanics. For the most part, there are some changes rule-wise that you will find inside the 3 different books in the box set. But for the most part, 2300 AD is going to play like Traveler as far as the mechanics of the game. Now, I also understand why this isn't standalone. Probably because the folks over at Mongoose Publishing weren't real sure how in demand this new edition of 2300 AD would be. So they figured, well, rather than just taking like a big core book and then having the equipment book and then the setting book, have smaller softcover books, put them in a box set, and required the Traveler core rule book in order to play 2300 AD. I will also mention there are some other Traveler books that are recommended that you have. You don't necessarily have to have them. I got to say, I wish there was an adventure in here. I say that all the time with core releases. I always like to see a short adventure. I think here, I would have liked to have really seen it because it would have given game masters a better feel for how a campaign for 2300 AD is going to be very different than a Traveler campaign. Here we have a lot of technical stuff. So in these books, we've got a lot of equipment. We got a lot of stat blocks. We've got a lot of gear and weapons, equipment, all this different stuff. As far as how to run a 2300 AD campaign, there is some page space devoted to it. And we do get some themes and different types of campaigns, but each is only a few paragraphs in length. So I would have liked to have seen maybe a 20-page adventure. And I get it. Mongoose Publishing doesn't normally do 20-page adventures. They usually do like 80 to 100-page adventures. So I get why there's not one in this box set. For one, they didn't want to probably go past the $99.99 MSRP because that would probably turn some people off. But once again, would have liked to have seen an adventure with this. As far as production quality, these are softcover books. So keep in mind, they're not going to hold up to repeated use like a stitch binding hardcover is going to. But should be pretty solid. As far as artwork, there's loads of artwork throughout each of the books. We got plenty of pieces of art for the various different aliens and the intelligent aliens and the non-intelligent aliens, as well as various different guns and vehicles and starships. So there is tons of artwork throughout, all really, really nicely done. There is just loads of content in 2300 AD, maybe not necessarily aimed at the game master running a game, but more so how all of this gear, all of this tech, the philosophies of humanity are quite different in 2300 AD than they are in Traveler. So all in all, definitely dig this, but I do think that it is for a niche market out there. If you are looking for something that's going to be very space opera and lots of action and big starship battles and things like that, 2300 AD is probably not going to be best suited for your style of play. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm just saying that there are probably other science fiction role-playing games that are better aimed at that sort of gaming, such as Traveler. But if you are looking for something that's a bit more near future, because it's less than 300 years in our future, but you're also looking at something that's going to be more hard science fiction, more smaller personal stories, such as, colonization or exploring and charting new stars and exploring new stars, even military campaigns where the player characters are mercs, maybe they're the boots on the ground, things like that, or a combination of all of those, or even just having your travelers be merchants going from colony to colony. Certainly can have those kind of campaigns also. But like I said, if you're looking to tell maybe smaller, more personal stories that have more of a hard science fiction bend to them, then I would definitely say 2300 AD is for you. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give the 2300 AD box set a 7.5 out of 10. Do like it? Don't think it's for everybody, but I think this is jam-packed with really cool content. Little surprised that it's not a standalone game by itself. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. And of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.